You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the March 28th, 2023 meeting of the Michigan City Plan Commission. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, March 28th, 2023 at 6:10, and this is the regular meeting of the Michigan City Plan Commission. Roll call, please.
Mr. Balling.
Here.
Mr. Dabney.
Present.
Mr. Granquist is absent. Mr. Klinder is absent. Mr. Latchford.
Here.
Miss Mealy. Miss Tejeda. Mr. Zimmer.
Here.
And Attorney Hill.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. York. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
So move.
I'll second.
All for the vote. Mr. Balling.
Yes.
Mr. Dabney.
Aye.
Mr. Latchford.
Yes.
Miss Mealy. Miss. Oh.
You already did it. You already did it.
Miss Tejeda.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved.
Next item is to approve the minutes from our last regular meeting, which was January 24th. I assume everyone had a chance to review those. If there's no changes, I'll take a motion to approve.
I motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
All for the vote. Mr. Balling.
Yes.
Mr. Dabney.
Abstain.
Mr. Latchford.
Yes.
Miss Mealy.
Yes.
Miss Tejeda.
Yes.
And Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion approved.
Next item is our one and only petition this evening. Who is here to speak on the behalf of that?
So I can read. Would you like for me to read it all?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll read all. I'll introduce it. Our petition tonight is 900-23. Request by Beachwalk Property Owners Association Inc., Beachwalk Conservation Inc., and WP21 LLC for preliminary approval of an amendment to Beachwalk Phase 3B PUD, adding the area generally known as Quezon Park to add parcels of property owned by WP21 LLC and Beachwalk Conservation Inc. for the purposes of further orderly development and enhancement to Beachwalk Phase 3B PUD, and they will be represented tonight by Attorney Christopher Willoughby. Christopher.
Good evening, Christopher Willoughby, Brady Nelson and James at 126 East 5th Street here in Michigan City. As Mr. York indicated, I'm here on behalf of the applicants, which are Beachwalk Homeowners Association, Beachwalk Conservation Inc., and WP21 LLC. You have a recent and hot off the presses concept plan and a little bit bigger versions than we filed, as well as an amended application. And after a lot of work on behalf of my clients and those that I'm representing that have appointed me to represent them this evening, as well as Mr. Hale and Mr. York, The application was amended so that we could put some history there because it's a little bit mind-boggling. And I give Shem some credit because he's one of two people. The other one is Adam Weirs that I have tonight. He's a member of the Beach Walk Homeowners Association, and I also have Nazar, and I'm going to. He's a principal in the WP 21 LLC that's the owner of the lots, but to put all of this together is a little bit mind-boggling because of all the changes and since the original inception of Beach Walk. I don't want to bore you with the history because it is laid out in that application, and we did that for record purposes. But essentially what we're here for tonight is the process that's required of the code is to amend this PUD. And to do so, we need to come before you, provide proper notice, which was pretty extensive. But essentially, we're looking to add the 3 parcels that are highlighted in the concept plan and is laid out in the application. And they are the Beach Walk Preservation, the vacant land, and it's parcel 1. So it's, if you're looking at the plan, there's somewhat in the middle and where the word concept plan, pardon, in the concept plan, the large plan that's in front of you. If you look straight up, there are 2 vacant parcels just to the right of the words concept plan in the middle at the top. So those 2 plans that have a diagonal separation between them, or sorry, those 2 plots, there's parcel 1 and parcel 2. One's a conservation. One says Beach Walk Preservation Minor Subdivision Parcel 1, a bit vacant land. The other says conservation easement, and it's parcel 2. And then the other pieces are parcels that we're discussing are the 14 at the bottom that go along Washington Park Boulevard. And so the ownership here is Beach Walk owns the top lot. The conservation easement is owned by the Conservation Corporation. And then Nazar and this WP 21 LLC, of which he's a principal here representing this evening, those lots are owned by him. And so in order to put all of these and make this work, and there's a lot of process left, we'll be back before you to do a major subdivision and all of those, but we have to follow this process. Each step of this PUD and subsequent amendments, and I believe the last one was around 2020, were the same process come to you to get that approval. So we are seeking, and as part of the thinking and putting in the conservation portion is so that we have the green space and the open spaces that are required, and with some engineering and any technical aspects that you have questions, I think that they'll be more appropriate and compelling in the future as we go forward with the subdivision. But these representatives of the association with regard to the approvals that are necessary, we can provide you with any information you need. But the technicality is, again, we're tonight, to keep it simple, we're looking to add these 3 pieces of the property into the PUD. So in order to do that, we really essentially have to check some boxes and go through the process. And all of those are contained in Article 25. And again, as Mr. York indicated at the outset of here, that by adding these properties, it's going to allow Beach Walk to continue to maintain and expand in the fashion that it's been developed in the past, while also, preparing for future, providing much needed housing and some developments. There's been many, many months of negotiation between WP 21, the association. There was a meeting in the fall, which it was overwhelmingly approved to allow, and the agreement's all subject to getting our approval. So this is the first step. I will not go through because, given his thoroughness, I'm certain that Mr. Hale will advise you on what the legalities are and what you must consider. But we believe, based on our submissions from the application, as well as this concept plan, that we meet the requirements that allow you to approve this next step and refer us or recommend approval by the City Council. I will defer any questions and direct any technical questions that you may have with those that I have with me. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willoughby. Skylar, sorry, Mr. York, do you want to give us your report, please?
I think that'd be, yeah. Let's do that and then. This is a report for 900-23 amendment to Beach Walk Phase 3B. Typically, it's called the Beechwood subdivision. That's what it was originally when it came to us before. The request is for approval of a major amendment to the to the Beach Walk PUD. Staff analysis. According to the zoning ordinance, a planned unit development overlay district is a tool permitted and regulated by Indiana code with standards intended to accommodate, among other factors, development on sites with significant natural features, to provide the opportunity to preserve common open space and natural features. The ordinance further states that the standards should not be sought primarily to avoid the imposition of standards and requirements of other zoning classifications. In order to encourage PUD developments on specific properties, the Plan Commission and City Council may relax or waive one or more of the requirements of the underlying zoning district through the approval of a PUD district overlay district ordinance. The property in question is currently undeveloped. What they're bringing in is currently just open space and wooded area, parking area, things of that nature. So it's undeveloped. The underlying zoning is R1E Waterfront Residential District. The land immediately adjacent to the east is M2 Heavy Industrial Zoning, and north, south, and west is zoned R1E Single Family Residential. The land with new residential lots has been previously subdivided through the Planning Commission in 2022. The developer is proposing to develop single family homes at this location, and now is proposing that the subdivision be added into Beach Walk PUD. According to section 25.08, based on the following standards, the Plan Commission may deny, approve, or approve with conditions the proposed preliminary PUD site plan, subject to approval of the PUD ordinance by the legislative body. Planning Department makes the following findings in accordance with section 25.08. A, the PUD shall meet the qualifying conditions of section 25.02. The original intent of Beach Walk PUD was to create a living area that could exist within the natural setting of the dunes and preserve natural areas for the enjoyment of the Beach Walk community. This amendment perpetuates the original intent and adds a significant amount of preserved land to the Beach Walk PUD. B, the PUD must be consistent with the county land development plan. The proposed PUD amendment is currently exceeding 25%. Exceeding the 25% conservation requirement. The proposed use will not require an increase in the use of public services, facilities, or utilities. The proposed use is compatible with the overall goals of the residential use as proposed in the city county land development plan. C, the uses must have a beneficiary effect in terms of public health, safety, welfare, or convenience, or on present and future potential surrounding land uses. Proposed use must not adversely affect the public utility and circulation system surrounding properties or the environment. Public benefit shall be one which could not be achieved under the regulations of the underlying district alone and that of the zoning district. Areas designated as conservation easements are beneficial in that they preserve significant and highly sensitive environmental areas such as woodlands located adjacent to Lake Michigan, which provide significant habitat and recreation opportunities. D, any modifications to the dimensional standards of this ordinance, such as lot sizes, setbacks, height limits, required facilities, buffer, open space, permitted sign area, or other similar dimensional standards shall be reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission. So I'm not going to go through all their standards because most of them are ones that they're putting on themselves, but I am going to go through the ones that are applicable to the R1E section of our zoning code. So it'd be our normal, what we would normally review something under. Requested modifications, table 4.03 lot width. The R1E district requires a minimum of 50 feet. And I meant to put underneath there what they're requesting. Some of these lots are around 48 feet, but they're doing that to get the conservation areas on the corner. They're putting in some conservation areas. Table 4.04, building dimensional requirements. Required is R1E setback. The R1E setback in front yard is 20, rear yard is 20, and side yard is 7. They're requesting a front yard of 15, a rear yard of 30, and a side yard of 5. Also, it should be note that Washington Park Boulevard is the rear yard. So off of Washington Park Boulevard, you're going to have a 30-foot setback as opposed to a 20-foot setback. And you can see that denoted in the in your setback for your concept plan. The maximum lot coverage for R1E is 50% building coverage. So we allow up to 50%. They're actually putting a request for 40%. So they're actually reducing that down even further to 40%. Standards of note, privacy fences are not allowed along Washington Park Boulevard. So we won't have a wall of a privacy fence along Washington Park Boulevard. They will treat that as a front yard rather than a rear yard. So in a front yard, you're allowed a 3.5 foot picket or split rail fence. That's what they are saying they're going to do along Washington. If they do put fences, that's what will be allowed along Washington Park Boulevard.
Could you repeat that?
So in reviewing this, we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to end up with a wall of privacy fences along Washington Park Boulevard. So it's actually pleasant to look at. So what we did was we said you have to treat those as a front yard, even though the houses sit further back, they have to treat that as a front yard. In a front yard, regular zoning, you would be allowed to build a 3.5 foot tall fence that's picketed so you can see through it.
Will there be driveway going into a garage?
There would be driveways. Yes.
That doesn't make sense to me, but okay.
Yeah.
You said we acted like a front yard. Many front yards don't have a driveway.
But we don't want to create a wall of just fence back there. That would be unsightly, and basically you're turning your back to the neighborhood, essentially.
That would be turning back to the neighborhood too.
Yeah.
Wouldn't having garages be turning back to the neighborhood as well?
If they're not designed appropriately. Yeah. So, any increase in density requirements of the underlying zoning district must be approved by the Plan Commission and be included under review of the preliminary PUD site plan and in the PUD ordinance. The developer is not proposing any increase in density not already allowed. F. The number and dimensions of off-street parking shall be sufficient to meet the minimum required by Article 18. However, where warranted by overlapping or shared parking arrangements, the Plan Commission may reduce the required number of parking spaces in the PUD ordinance. This petition did not request any special consideration for parking or off-street parking. Therefore, the new single-family homes will be held to the standard of Article 18 of the zoning code for single-family residential homes at a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling. The petitioner will also have access to additional parking at the Beach Walk overflow lot, and on-street parking shall not be allowed along this location along Washington Park Boulevard to accommodate the new homes. G. All roads and parking areas within the PUD shall meet the minimum design standards unless modified by the Plan Commission and legislative body in the PUD ordinance. The private roads and access roads have previously been approved and constructed with the original PUD was approved. H, safe, convenient, uncongested, and well-defined vehicular and pedestrian circulation within and to the site shall be approved. The new lots will have an automobile access from Washington Park Boulevard as planned in the original subdivision. I, landscaping shall be preserved and or provided to ensure that proposed use will be adequately buffered from one another and from surrounding public and private property. Plantings and other landscape features shall meet or exceed the standards of Article 17. The developer proposes to further preserve the landscaping and tree cover on the site from the requirements of the preservation of land and through the requirements for the preservation of land as per the proposed PUD ordinance and the proposed restrictive covenants provided as part of the application. That goes to speaking about the preservation area of parcel 2 that is going to be folded into this and used as a preservation area. So it will always remain a preserved area. J, judicious effort shall be used to preserve significant natural, historical, or architectural features and the integrity of the land. The PUD must be consistent with the county land development plan. The proposed PUD amendment is currently exceeding 25% conservation requirement. The proposed use will not require an increase to public service and utilities. The proposed use is compatible with the overall goals of the resident. Wait a second. Sorry. Let me back up. Marie J again. Judicious effort shall be used to preserve significant natural, historical, or architectural features and the integrity of the land. There we go. The developer proposes to preserve significant natural features on the site through the proposed conservation easements as shown on the PUD site plan. K, adequate water and sewer facilities shall be available or shall be provided by the developer as part of the site development. The developer has already had significant conversations with each utility as part of the original subdivision and does not plan to deviate from the original utility plan. Staff recommendation. The planning staff has reviewed the proposed preliminary PUD plan and PUD overlay district and recommends that the Plan Commission forward the proposed preliminary PUD site plan and PUD overlay district plan or ordinance to the City Council with a favorable recommendation subject to the following conditions. 1, there should be no access control gate from the public street right of way to the proposed private roads. 2, there shall be no on-street parking allowed on Washington Park Boulevard where the 14 new lots are being proposed. And then I don't have a third one.
Mr. Hale, are you ready to give your report?
Yes, sir. My report for petition 900-23 parentheses 1 would be as follows. Initially, I would advise the Plan Commission that I've had an opportunity to review extremely extensive notification documentation supplied by the petitioner. They are in order and you are free from a notification standpoint to consider this matter this evening. I know that most of you, perhaps all of you, are aware of a PUD, which is a planned unit development, but I hope you'll allow me to give you some history. Being a planned unit development, a project is similar to an overlay zoning district. That is, the PUD can establish its own standards, such as lot size or setbacks, that supersede or take precedence over the underlying zoning. However, the underlying zoning applies to everything that is not approved by the Plan Commission and the City Common Council. So the owners of the property are not free to establish any rules other than those that appear. And they are shown in the petitioner's original application in the exhibits. So if you look at Exhibit D, or to the application that you've received, that has these overlay standards. And those are the only ones, as Mr. York pointed out, that will be changed. Otherwise, the existing zoning rules apply. I think that that's an important piece of information. As both Mr. Willoughby and Mr. York pointed out to you, the applicant or petitioners are seeking approval to amend the existing Beach Walk PUD by adding 3 additional parcels, specifically to Phase 3B PUD of Beach Walk, usually referred to or often referred to as Cason Park. Some history. Beach Walk was initiated when the owner of the property recorded some declarations and covenants that went with a certain piece of land. On December 28th of 1992, this body, the Plan Commission of Michigan City, approved the development of the original Beach Walk as a planned development. Don't be confused if you see that word, because the law has changed in our ordinance, and laws now refer to PUD, and that's what we are dealing with here, a planned unit development. On the next day, December 29th, 1992, the city of Michigan City entered into a contract with the owners of the land and established what is officially referred to as Phase 2, the Beach Walk PUD. Following that 1992 event, Beach Walk has been expanded, as we're all aware. But pertinent to this request is that there was an approval of the Beach Walk Phase 3B, which followed Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 3A. Approval of Beach Walk Phase 3B on May 24th, 2005, and there was a contract between the city and the owners dated the same date, May 24th, 2005. It is this contract, plat, and phase of Beach Walk that these petitioners, applicants, are asking you to amend. Since 2005 and that Phase 3B approval, there's been a lot done in Beach Walk, but nothing that has reached the level of a contract or approval of a project or a project change at Beach Walk. So that brings us to where we are tonight, the petitioner's request. And that request is to be considered pursuant to Article 25 of our zoning ordinance, which regulates, authorizes, and sets forth the process for the establishment of a PUD. And our ordinance provides that Mr. York, as the enforcement official, can determine if a proposed amendment is significant, that it requires approval as a brand new PUD. That is, this amendment has been determined by Mr. York as being so significant that it requires treatment as a new PUD and requires a new preliminary PUD site plan and the application. The process that's set out is that there is to be a pre-application meeting. Mr. York has met with the applicants and their advisors on numerous occasions. There is the filing of the application. The applicants submitted their application, which has been designated by the planning department as petition 900-23 sub 1. And with their application, they included exhibits A, B, and C, which are legal descriptions of the property. Exhibit D, which are the overlay standards. Exhibit E, which is the preliminary site PUD site plan. And Exhibit F, proposed ordinance. our zoning ordinance requires that the applicants submit a proposed ordinance to be considered by the Common Council. Following filing of the application, there is checkpoint agency reviews, and then there is a plan commission review and a public hearing. That's where we're at this evening. The plan commission, following a public hearing, would make some sort of determination and ultimately forward the PUD amendment, the preliminary PUD site plan, to the City Common Council with either a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation. I will have more to say about what your options are in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Ham.
I'm not finished, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I think it's important to know that the Common Council may approve or deny the amendment to the PUD and the preliminary PUD site plan, or they may seek modifications or additions to any commitments. And so it's important for you to know that you have the ability to request that the petitioner applicants make modifications or that they agree to commitments or requirements. And those are required to be acknowledged and accepted by the petitioner applicants. That is, if you say approval is dependent upon a commitment or a modification, they are required to do that if they want it to be acted on by the council. This is, Mr. Willoughby indicated to you that this is the beginning of the process. There is to be a final PUD site plan that is submitted and additional checkpoint reviews and final action by this body. That is, the final PUD site plan will come before the Plan Commission again after action by the City Council. At that time, you take final action on the proposal and request. And because this involves subdivision, that final PUD site plan review must include primary plat approval. And that means that there has to be secondary plat approval, which is a requirement of our subdivision ordinance. That would be a third step, if you will. I tried to provide you with copies of the pertinent zoning ordinance requirements for consideration of this matter in section 25.02, 25.05, and most importantly, the standards that you are to consider in section 25.08. Mr. York covered those in his report, the section 25.08. So finally, I want to cover what actions you can take. If you believe that you have all the materials that are necessary for you to make a decision, you may consider this matter. But if you are not, you may request additional materials in support of the application and continue the public meeting to a future date. If you feel that the petitioner's request should have conditions or modifications, as I mentioned, you can add those as a requirement of any approval, and the applicant has to incorporate that into his preliminary PUD site plan prior to action by the Common Council. You may forward this amended PUD plan and the preliminary PUD site plan to the City Council with a favorable recommendation or an unfavorable recommendation. And following that, as I mentioned earlier, the City Council will take action. They will consider the petitioner's proposed ordinance, which is attached to the materials that you have. And now I'm finished. Thank you, Mr. Zimmer, and I'm sorry I took so much time.
It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Can I just get one clarification? Mr. Hale, you said that one of these documents was prepared by you. Can you identify what it would look like on the first page? Oh, right, then on this thing. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, let's, are there any questions or comments from the board members?
Mr. Zimmer, I forgot to read one piece that's kind of important. Could I
Yeah.
just add that into the record?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I skipped over it. I didn't mean to skip over it. It's just, there was a lot to read. Under I, landscaping shall be preserved. I just want to be clear that so they're bringing in 2.71 acres of land, which are the lots that you see, the 14 lots. So to set aside, right now, they would need to set aside 0.6 of an acre to meet the 25% for the 14 lots. They're proposing inside that 2.7, they're setting aside approximately 0.18%. But then they're also adding 4.8 acres of additional area. So they're setting aside 0.18 acres here, and then an additional 4.8 acres here. So they're exceeding. I don't know what the percentage of excess is, but I did it upstairs, but I didn't write it here. They're exceeding the 25% required of the normal 0.6. I just wanted to put that in the record.
Information should be shown on the drawings to be clear to us.
Is that what those two little slots at each end of the are? That's the 0.6?
That's the, no, that's actually just the 0.18.
0.18, yeah.
Mhm. Yep. Required total to bring in the 2.71 is 0.6. That was what would be required to set aside.
And the other 4 acres
Is your parcel number 2.
there? Okay.
Good.
So explain how that works, Skylar, if you could. Is the designer or the planner here perhaps to answer that question?
What's the question?
What's the question?
It's what does this mean that parcel 2 is getting the it's providing the conservation? What does that mean? That
So it will be preserved in perpetuity it will become a preservation area.
so this would not be developed at all?
No.
And also parcel 1?
Parcel 1. No, parcel 1 would it would provide, parcel 1 right now provides, it's the overflow parking area for Beach Walk.
Okay.
It is not part of Beach Walk though. That's why it's being brought in as part of this process. It was purchased by Beach Walk, but it was never formally brought in. So they're taking the opportunity to fold in the petitioner or one of the petitioner's property, the 14 lots, and then fold in these pieces as well and make them officially part of the Beach Walk property.
Okay.
But they're saying right now they're going to set aside to meet the requirements. They're going to exceed the requirements because they're going to make this preservation number 2 parcel. That's going to become in perpetuity to Beach Walk. It will always be it will be part of Beach Walk and will be a preservation area.
That preservation.
Conservation. I shouldn't say I should say conservation area. That's what the language in the code is. Absolutely.
But wasn't that there anyway? Wasn't that there before as conservation area?
It was there, but it wasn't part of Beach Walk.
So does the developer who's building the 14 homes owns that land?
So to clarify, you have 3 applicants that have joined in this petition. So that's the Beach Walk Conservation Inc., which is a separate nonprofit. They want to roll that in there. They have their own bylaws and restrictions with regard to that property. So it is solely for environmental purposes. And again, they're all taking the opportunity to as we're amending and going through this process to do some of those things that they perhaps the process and the cost benefit of doing and rolling these things in before weren't worth it. Now that they have the opportunity to add the lots from WP 21, which is the 14, and this conservation piece, which again, everybody benefits from. It's just not part of the PUD now.
Yeah.
And same with the overflow parking. The benefit of that overflow parking will address some of the parking concerns that we had in our pre-planning meetings of the new development and not having parking on Washington Park Boulevard. So all of these pieces to us fit together, but reminding you at the outset, there is so much here in the history of it. It's somewhat confusing how all of these parcels have been added originally, some amendments over the years, and then these other parcels that have been obtained. But you have three entities here that are looking to become to add something to the existing PUD of Beach Walk now. And the appropriate authorizations have come from each of those entities, which then authorized me to be here tonight before you with the application to amend this PUD. So I know that.
I'm not sure that I understand them, but I think.
Yeah, I'm confused too.
So it may seem as an.
Let me ask a question, because I was, that
Mhm.
is this conservation area, easement area had been already designated conservation and being used as conservation area for Michigan City?
But it's owned outside of Beach Walk. It's separately owned by conservation, Beach Walk Conservation Inc. So it was already designated, but they're putting it in the PUD, and it'll become part of and beneficial to.
You can benefit from what was there already.
Everybody's going
You
to.
have less conservation on your site because you're taking advantage of the site that's there.
It'll be conservation, but it will be assisting Beach Walk as well as the developer that's adding these lots and accomplishing what the conservation, the nonprofit wants to, is to have the benefits of Beach Walk. So we'll all be there, but in perpetuity, that conservation portion will never be developed.
So, yeah, so I understand what you're saying, but I guess our question is, why doesn't the developer still have to meet the requirement of the 0.6 acres for the lots that he's building on?
Well, so by what we are doing is adding those lots, they're all becoming part of the bigger PUD, and it will be meeting that.
Yeah, you'll be exceeding, as part of the bigger PUD, you'll be exceeding.
Well, I know, because you're taking advantage of a conservation area that already exists.
But we don't control the conservation area now. It's controlled privately by a private company. By folding it all,
So these two developers have worked out a deal.
by folding it all together, you're getting it preserved in perpetuity. It can never be touched because the BPOA, it has to stay in place because it functions as the set aside. Does that make sense? So it's the set aside for this. So it will always be there. If it maintains as a public or private, it could be sold or transferred or whatever at that point in time. But now you're assuring that it'll be set aside as part of the Beach Walk BPOA. It will be set aside as conservation, required conservation.
If I may just shed some light, I guess, on the ownership. The ownership for the parcel 2, I believe it's parcel 2. Yes, parcel 2. The name of the company for that ownership is conservation. It's a little bit, I guess, deceiving to say that it's a conservation easement, but the group itself that owns it, they do conservation. So they can use it for something else if they would like. So it's not a conservation per se, even though that it's a conservation group.
Oh, you're saying that's their proper name?
That's the name of the LLC.
Wow, that's confusing.
Right.
Right.
So it is not now recognized by Michigan City or any.
It is not.
State or any other place.
It's a group that its name conservation.
That is actually correct.
It has a board that has that name.
They've dedicated it to that purpose, but it isn't officially.
No, it is not a piece of our preserved area or anything of that nature. But by creating this PUD, what they're saying is, and yes, the developer is taking advantage of that through this PUD process because we're folding all three of these together. But now we're actually designating it as conservation, it will become a conservation easement.
It's going to be conservation.
Absolutely.
Well, and I do want to point out,
It will not be developed. It can't be developed because if you take away, we had this issue where we took away from one PUD in a conservation area, unbeknownst to us, we caught it and we had to go back and redo everything and add conservation easement back in. So it will always be conserved from this point forward.
and I do want to point out that the developer of those 14 lots was previously approved on a primary approval for a subdivision. That's at the bottom of that concept plan. So those lots that are now that we're seeking to add, that was previously approved on primary approval for a subdivision with essentially what's drawn there. So the difference is what we're adding and the density and the overflow parking. The synergies work, assuming that you approve them, but they work amongst the developers and the conservation corporation and the beach walk. So this was the time that, the stars aligned to make this amendment and make it from a cost benefit worth it for everybody to approach you for that approval.
And what's on parcel 2 now?
It's all wooded right now.
Is that big, huge dune?
I think there is some elevation in there. I don't know. It's a lot of dune. It's more or less just like probably like a moraine type wooded deciduous trees. Yeah, a lot though. I mean, it's pretty dense tree wise.
Conservation area would be untouched and maintained?
It would be maintained and untouched. I think they have some trails in there. Conservation doesn't mean that you can't use it for recreational purposes, trails, things of that nature. What it means is you can't go in there and carve out another lot, or carve out another 5 lots in it. That would be taken away.
Or make more parking.
Correct. That's correct.
But
Okay,
it does
so
give the benefit to the association of making use of that environmental space.
So maybe I'm not remembering, but when we did the original approval of the 14 lots, were we told though that the backs of the houses were going to be facing Washington Park Boulevard? I don't seem to remember that.
We were not. No, that is a change.
Okay.
That is a change in when they went through the PUD I don't know if you got, I'm maybe speaking, I don't want to say that term. When they went through the PUD process with Beach Walk, they want to actually face onto Jake Lane. Before they didn't have a relationship with Beach Walk. And Jake Lane abuts these. So really you got a double frontage lot now.
So, but why can't they just walk out the back door and be in Beach Walk and still have the fronts of their houses face Washington Park Boulevard? Because my concern is that that's going to look, I don't know. I wish somebody could show us like, what are those houses going to look like when you've got a whole row of backs of houses facing a major thoroughfare into a residential subdivision.
It would have been nice to have some more information about even what's on the other side. What kind of homes and where there are other homes, because we're kind of operating in the dark here without understanding really what's happening.
I'd like to add to that as well. I was, the driveways were not shown, which I understand it's a plat, but I think that from an aesthetic standpoint, that to see 14 driveways lined up in this close proximity and the rear of the house is just not going to be very aesthetically pleasing. That's one question. The second question is the conservation easements on either end of the 14 lots. So that's just concentrated at those ends. There is no further. Is there any way to consider spreading out that area like within each of the lots? Because it just seems odd to have like these at the end. And question number 3, facing Washington Park Boulevard, it was mentioned that there will be vehicular traffic. So where is that to be located?
How you mean vehicular traffic? Just entryways?
Yeah.
They'll come off of Washington Park Boulevard.
But where in between these 14 lots?
I'm sorry, I'm
If
not
you're to turn
understanding.
off Washington Park Boulevard into Beach Walk,
No, you won't be able to do that. We're not going to bring any. The only place you can go into Beach Walk is the 40-foot common area, which is the rear. Yeah, that's your rear. It's already there.
okay, and then the
This
last
is why we
question,
needed a better plan, by the way, and it's still not developed enough to really give us that information.
right,
We're kind of not fully understanding the PUD and its access to the other areas.
and then the last question or comment, is it's currently wooded, this area where the 14 lots are. So are those trees going to be removed in order to construct whatever development, or is that going to remain intact?
So they did. So when they did the original subdivision, they had to do a tree survey, and it'll be what's removed is removed based upon the placement of the house.
Okay,
So the tree survey still exists. So you can't prevent them from removing trees, but we can prevent them from clear cutting. That's what the point of the survey, or I'm sorry, of the tree
Okay.
survey.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So replacement works. Well, if you are allowed to take down certain amount of trees, I mean, it's just, yeah, unfortunately, it's just part of it. But basically, we're not seeing building footprints here. We're seeing buildable area is what you're seeing. So in order for me to determine which ones, I have to see where the building's going to go in relation. Typically what people will do though, rather than taking them down, is they'll move. If there's a big oak, they can move. It helps them decide where they're going to go on the inside that buildable footprint. It doesn't mean that all those trees are coming down inside that buildable footprint.
Thanks, that was my concern.
Just a comment, if I can make a comment.
And Mr. Balling, let's let them answer her first two questions first, though.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Try to. First, I want to remind everybody, this is the initial concept plan. And so there's more process, and there will be a final plan that comes before you. I do appreciate your inquiries, but these are the requirements, and that's not to shortchange, because I think my clients each, and those that I'm here representing, as well as Global, certainly tend to go above and beyond. So these drawings, they don't generally reach the level that you would like to see for the full picture. And we're at the preliminary stage, which then, as we move forward in progress, that's where you see a little more of the detail. I want to remind everybody that if you didn't approve this, the developer already has primary approval. They could develop those lots as they were approved, and they could build, and they could have their driveways, and they can build the houses that were approved for that subdivision. Without the conservation, without the adding of this bigger space into Beach Walk in general, of which all of those residents get to benefit. So that's not holding anybody over a barrel, but I'm trying to give the full picture that there's nothing that has significantly changed here. And the other thing is that some of the specific, because as Mr. Hale explained, some of the specific requirements, short of asking for any deviations or changes from what the code says, we're subject to the zoning code. So what can be built is, short of asking for a variance or something like that, is what's set forth in your code, other than the specific requirements and design requirements, et cetera, that Beach Walk has. And Beach Walk, it has some pretty specific, and some of our discussions in our meetings were that these houses are going to look more like they have two fronts versus something, and Skylar did communicate during this entire process, is nobody wants to feel like their back's getting turned on a neighborhood that's been there for years and years. And that isn't the intention. And I don't think this represents it, but it's tough for you to see that from these drawings, that, again, following the requirements that we're supposed to submit and show you that the spaces and otherwise lay out the requirements for the amendment to the PUD, that level of detail isn't before you. What else have I missed from your questions?
I don't even remember the second question. It seems like that was so long ago.
Sure.
Well,
I think it might have been about the conservation easements.
Oh, so those easements,
Yeah, spreading them out.
yeah, they're tight as they go. And in terms, some of it has to do with locating the utilities, and they're really not very large spaces anyway, and that's hence the necessity to bring in this bigger parcel to go ahead.
I would add too that so these things are these houses set 30 feet. The setbacks are 30, but also in our code. So in the front of these along Washington Park Boulevard, you are going to see natural area there, but they can't count that easement toward it.
Okay, and they can't make that strip along Washington Park Boulevard.
Can't be used as conservation, but it is easement through there because you're going to have a main through there.
Okay,
But you can't use it. It's not allowed. So we make you add extra.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Well, and part of it, just sorry to, I mean, there's a bike path going in here, right? I mean, there's some other things that are going to go along with this process that bigger plans for the development in general that again necessitate that take into account the development, the design, and the layout of those. Because again, there isn't city parking that's going to be allowed that otherwise, if houses were built, that probably could be built there, right? And the bike path. So there's some other considerations. I'm gonna.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Nazar Krivko. I'm principal of WP21, owners of 14 lots. And I just want to give comments about driveway. It seems like everybody is concerned about this. So as it was said before, all the drivers in front of Washington Park was already approved, and they designed not like a whole concrete piece. It's a stone pieces which include inside the grass, which again help with storm water, and also on the Washington Boulevard, if you're familiar with the area, there is no lot that have driveway from the back. There is all the houses on Washington Boulevard have entrance from the front, from Washington Boulevard, all of them. There is none of them that I know, that I'm aware about. I just want to bring it up so it's not something different from everything else. It's exactly the same as you have right now. So this was just my only comment that I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazar. I think after your explanation, I get that now, because I was concerned about a lot of concrete driveways, but if they're more natural, like whether it's gravel, chips, and there is the wooded area, I can see where maybe that wouldn't look as strikingly awful as I thought it was going to when I first heard it.
Yeah, thank you. And again, like we mentioned before, me personally, and the original plan was presented by John Doyle that he passed away, unfortunately. Our main goal was try to preserve as much as possible woods, because I don't like empty land. It is not desirable for people. I want to see woods. So basically, like Skylar York say, we're just gonna cut what need to be cut in order to put the building, but we are gonna keep as much as possible woods in a place. It's the first thing. Second thing, there was another comment about conservation area, the percentage that we're giving up. We, without any other parcels, my specific parcel, my 14 lots, give more percentage for, how you call it, like more than 25% is not for conserves. So basically, we, John Doyle, make all the studies to for stormwater and all the stuff, and you know what I'm talking.
Yeah.
So sorry, my English is not perfect.
I know what he's talking about. So during the process of subdivision, one of the comments was made that could this land hold enough stormwater to cause it? Could it accept enough stormwater for the 14 houses? So what John Doyle did, and correct me, I'm not as good with stormwater and MS4 and all those things. So what John Doyle did was he calculated the remaining space, if you will, after, say, the houses are set or the setbacks are in place. And basically, he's like, if you think about it, these lots are so big that there's excess land that is, I won't call it conserved, but is available, if you will. But again, like I said to Rose, it can't be added into the conservation area, even if it is not being built on, because it's utility easements, it's things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I presented that correctly or not. Yeah.
Before you sit down, I think I heard you say, sorry? say three things that I didn't quite get. I think you said that there have already been driveways improved, and I understand that to mean
Correct.
a curb cut.
Correct. So basically, as of right now, Washington Boulevard doesn't have any curbs. There is no curbs. There is just asphalt, and that's it. So the plans that we have approved, primary plat that was approved prior last year, we add at my, let's say at my expense, at my cost, we adding the sidewalk, wide sidewalk in the front of all properties to help make the area better and for the bike path. Also, we maintaining the curb, concrete curb from our side with the gutters and stormwater retention.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we do what you see right now. You don't see it because this is the first stage. On the next, you're gonna see all the curbs. You're gonna see the sidewalks. You're gonna see the driveway. You're gonna see. We already go through this. We have nothing pretty much changed from the previous meetings. The only thing that changed that we add 2 conservation areas on the site, on east and west part. This is the only change that happened to the prior subdivision that was already approved. And already have all the concerns that pretty much we're talking about right now. It was already last year.
Let me
Well, the
clarify.
three things that are confusing, I didn't get to finish that. You're talking about these being like the front of a house. And I think all the people on Washington Boulevard deserve that. They have, because so that would continue to be the case. And yet you're saying that you were going to have curb cuts so that cars can pull in, and then maybe it'll be on gravel or something. So there will be cars parked in the front of the houses and maybe even garage there. So is it really like the front, or is it like the back with a driveway and the garages?
Well, let me clarify. So first of all, most of what Nazar is speaking of was already approved from another subdivision.
Yeah,
And
Chris, the only thing we're questioning now, though, is that you've made the statement that you're going to turn the houses around, and the fronts are going to face toward Beach Walk with their backs toward Washington Park.
Sure, but
But
what we're
assure
clear,
us.
we are assuring you, and I've said that, but clearly not enough to give you that security. We still have to go through the other process that Nazir went through to get these approvals. We still have to go through the subdivision process, but we can't go anywhere until we amend and bring these parcels in. So the subdivision process will involve and all of these requirements. And again, there is nothing that is changing. They did flip. Go ahead.
Yep. And to answer your question and your question, basically, this is the part that I get, let's say, I get caught with because Michigan City and all the community in Washington Park want to see frontage of the house from the Washington Park. And I understand it, and I think the same. This is the right way. Beach Walk Association want to see frontage from their side, which I also understand them. So the solutions that I come up with, I'm gonna have 2 frontage. Basically, it's gonna cost me more money on development, but the front and the back, or front and back, or 2 front, they're gonna be still presentable, and it's not gonna be like, oh, you're not gonna say this is the back of the house. When you're gonna see the building, you're gonna still think it's a front. No matter from what side you're gonna look, it's gonna look like a front of the house, and it's gonna look nice.
I'll be very interested to see what that looks like.
So,
And I'm going to defer because I have a member of the association here too. But again, what we can't get lost in is every other house has a driveway and a garage that's in front of it. Well, it is an issue based on the comments that we're having that there's a driveway, there's garages, and they're going to.
Said something that's an issue to some.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gigi. Go ahead.
Well, I haven't read the zoning code with respect to this area, but most of the zoning codes I'm familiar with have some issues with through lots, and this is a through lot. So it's got to have the back on one side and the front on the other side.
Right.
So you've created a problem with the plan here. And so that's what we're dealing with. And I don't know what the Michigan City zoning code says on this, and I'd love to know that.
I don't know if they created a problem because
But they have, because they've got a property that has a street on both sides. We've got Jane Lane and Washington Park Boulevard. So
it's a double frontage lot. We deal with those.
Yeah.
And we have to designate which one is a front, which one's a back. The zoning code allows us to do that. Actually allows us to do it internally. So you do have a double frontage lots, which we have a lot of them. We actually have a lot in this neighborhood of double frontage lots. So even if they just did this subdivision and kept in, I would say, in good contact with Beach Walk and didn't fold into this, I would say if Beach Walk granted them access to Jake Lane, they would still have the double frontage situation. We're not changing that, I guess is what I would say.
Well, I'm just pointing that out, that it's an inherent issue.
It is.
It's usually a problem because it means that some neighbors end up having the rear facing them, and that's a consideration. We don't know who the neighbors are, but it's.
I guess that's kind of where I was trying to mitigate, like no fences, no large fences along Wash Park Boulevard. Like that kind of is a mitigation issue. It's like, okay, you can turn your garage facing this way, but I don't want to see like a 6-foot wall along Washington Park Boulevard. That's kind of one of the mitigating factors I threw in there.
Okay, so I think we've done a good job of voicing our concerns, and I think they understand where we're coming from. So now, as Mr. Willoughby said, as they develop the plans, they're going to be cognizant that they need to create a house on 14 lots that's going to have 2 fronts. And that's going to be a challenge. So we'll see what they come up with. Okay.
Do you want to say? Adam, could you talk about the Architectural Review Committee?
Yeah. Sure. Thanks for your time this evening. I'm Adam Weers. I'm the vice president of the association. I also happen to own a house not in Beach Walk that is right next to this Washington Park Boulevard. A couple things. First, across the street from these Washington Park Boulevard homes is vacant land that's owned by a factory, so there will be no one looking at that. If you go down Washington Park Boulevard, all of those homes, including the one I own, have a garage in front with a house. You pull in on the drive, they're going to look the exact same. To address that, the Architectural Review Committee of Beach Walk is unique, I think, in Michigan City, but anything that's going to get built is going to get approved and go through a rigorous process. And we've got standards that have already been drafted, voted on by homeowners, approved by Nazar. These are going to be first-rate. This is going to be a first-rate development. So any concerns about appearance, I think, these are going to be very nice homes. Beach Walk's Architectural Committee will ensure that.
Great.
So
we just are concerned how it looks, because you're going to be satisfied how it looks toward the north. We're concerned about how it's going to look to the south.
Yeah.
Because you are, at that point, you are entering a neighborhood. And so it has to start setting the tone for the neighborhood at that point.
Which I appreciate. I own the house on the corner.
Yeah, right.
So I appreciate that. And I think I agree with that. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, please. Now, Russ.
In your first, I was on the board when you were approved. So, I'm all for this until I heard the switch, which was kind of a left curve. That's how I feel. You mentioned prefab homes. Does that work with Beach Walk?
Yes, it's still it's gonna be modular homes, but it's not a modular homes that everybody have in their mind, that it's like a small 6 feet tall ranch home. It's completely different homes. It's they are, first of all, they're gonna look very, very nice. And another thing, I was in the factory that produces homes a couple times already. We built a couple homes like this in Chicago already, And I can assure you that these homes are better than the stick-built home because all the wood that they use are sitting in the right temperature, in the right humidity. All the corners of the building are 90 degrees. Everything made, it's very, I would say, very high quality job. Plus, like things, like simple things, like where you have toilet holder in the bathroom. I'm sorry, but just detailed. They have special wood over there, so you screw it. It's not on the drywall. So these homes are, they think about these homes every day for 25 years. These homes are built better than a stick home. So believe me, I'm putting in this project a lot of my time, health, and money, and I want this project to be successful. And I definitely don't want to fail with the bad quality and bad looking homes. And my goal is the same. I want to see Washington Park when you enter this, because I own property across the street. So when you enter the Washington Park, I want to see the nice neighborhood. I don't want to see fence like Skylar say. I don't want to see back of the home. I want to see beautiful neighborhood that's going to benefit Beach Walk, Michigan City, and me at the end of the story. So this is how I see it.
Great. Thank you so much. That's great. It's great to know. Great to hear. Anybody else? Mr. Depp.
So, Skylar, if we go ahead and approve, basically we're approving them moving on to the next step.
Yeah, there's a few more steps.
There's a few more steps.
Yeah.
And then eventually we will get to see pictures of the home as it'll be presented. And at that time, we will still be able to thumbs up, thumbs down at that point. Am I correct?
Mr. Hale, can you weigh in on that? Like what? I want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn.
Because I don't want to hold this up if we're going to have chances to see the actual model down the line. I don't want to be the person that stagnates growth in housing coming into the neighborhood. If at some point down the line, we will get a chance to see the actual rendering of what they're putting up.
Because they have to approve the final site plan eventually.
Thank you.
That has to come back before the board. I would say at that point in time, it would be prudent to have some designs ready to go to get that approval. I would say, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Mr. President, may I weigh in?
Yes, Mr. Hale.
Mr. York, you would agree, would you not, that the approval that's going to be required will include primary plat approval?
Yes, it will. Yeah.
Does that include approving the design or the look of a house?
I would say at that time, it does not. It only approves a plat. That's why I think if it's a final site plan approval, then that's different, I would say.
Well, final site plan approval is going to have to just find that the preliminary PUD site plan has been followed and there aren't substantial deviations from it.
I would say yes to that. Yes.
I mean, to be fair to the members of the Plan Commission, I'm not sure that you would get an opportunity to weigh in by.
I would say that if it's something that is obviously it's something you guys care. I mean, you've said a lot about it. I would say that you'd have to approve it tonight with a condition and add it to the conditions that the rear of the houses look like fronts of houses. I think that you would say that to say that you're not going to have garages or anything like that, I think would be out of the, and I agree with everything along Washburn Boulevard front loads. It all loads to the front of the house. There aren't alleyways here. So if that would be a third condition, I'd say that they would bring us designs that look like so we can see the houses, or that the houses assure us through the architectural review committee is where it would go. It would go in as part of the architectural review committee. It wouldn't be us approving what the houses look like. It would be telling the architectural review committee that we want this as part of the PUD. approval. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, that was a roundabout way.
Yes, it does.
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
President.
Yes, sir.
May I just follow up? Mr. York is exactly right. And you recall that I indicated to you that you may set conditions. Now, Mr. York has proposed 2 in his report. And if you're going to impose those conditions, you would have to include them in any motion that was made. But you're free to require modifications or conditions as part of your approval. And if you do so, the applicants must abide by them before the Common Council may vote on the matter. That's what our ordinance says. So you have options beyond a continuance, beyond just a straightforward approval with a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation to the council.
Okay, thanks. So if we were, yes, Mr. Khalil, did you have something else you wanted to add? I know you've been trying to say something. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah, go ahead.
I guess one of the condition could be the rendering of the actual house or the proposed architectural plan. And that could be added to the final site plan, if that's okay, just to make sure that the process is moving forward. And if it's approved by the plan commission, hopefully it will be approved by the council as well, if it's favorable.
I would assume so, but I mean, it gives the public and people another, opportunity to comment on it. I think that if it's included as a part of the condition, though, it's basically coming from this commission saying this is, that we feel strongly about that.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Yes, I think the question is if we provide the rendering at the time of the final site plan.
I got you. Yes.
Is it okay for the council to approve it prior to the final site plan? And you can reject or make modification at the time of the rendering.
So council's either going to approve it as is, or they're going to kick it back to us and say, we want more conditions, or we want to take something away.
Yeah.
And then we have to reconsider it at that time,
right,
and figure out, and then send it back.
So
if you don't, it becomes law. But if you don't,
correct.
Right. Keep in mind one other issue, I think, about the neighborhood itself and fronting 2 streets. I think Beach Walk did a very good job in Lakeshore Drive and the back streets, which is the row of the houses on Lakeshore Drive. Those are, I'm not going to say they are similar, but I'm saying that there is design ideas that could actually make the front and the back somewhat similar. And you can see those on Lakeshore Drive and Beach Walk, First Street over, if you will. I think it's Childress Street, if I remember right. Maybe it is. But my point, I guess, that Beach Walk Association and neighborhood, they don't want to be disconnected as well. So the architectural committee that they have, it's taken a very close look to that issue on some of the phases that they have. So I just want to throw this out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Willoughby.
My only concern, and I appreciate the dialogue, is just being careful from a technical standpoint that we're all not intentionally, and you as the decision makers, putting ourselves in a spot where we don't have an ability. Because it seems to me that you're not requiring 2 fronts, but you want to make sure that it properly blends in the neighborhood. And I don't know what the proper language for you to approve, if you're inclined to improve it, versus having 2 fronts. And I'm concerned from my client's perspective, we don't have the design committee here. So you put a condition and you approve that so that it allows us to move forward, but hamstrings us with regard to designs that aren't going to get approved. It's a concern of how technical or how detailed we get versus the condition that you want these to properly blend into the neighborhood and not be a full, what we traditionally think is a rear of a home, right? And it's the discussion we had. So that's the example I use, is turning your back on the neighborhood, because it is the plan to implement and be able to be part of Beach Walk as well as the existing neighborhood. And as you pointed out, it's the entryway from that side, right? But I just have a concern as you consider whatever language of the condition is, that we set ourselves up for failure. So with trying to keep the spirit of what you'd like, but somehow making this not possible despite having an approval.
I find it hard to make that decision because, as I've been saying, there's information that's missing. And so you've said at one point that this is actually a factory on the other side of Washington Boulevard.
It's factory vacant lots.
It's just vacant.
Yeah, it's a vacant.
So
Yeah.
it could be developed as housing too.
You don't know that because
Well, the railroad's right there across. Yeah.
See, I don't know what's there.
Yeah.
And you're asking us to make a decision about something that when we really don't have all of that information. And I did ask before the meeting whether we could have some plans that would show us a little more about it. And we just didn't get that. I find that hard. I don't want to limit what we're telling you to do with respect to the Marquette Boulevard site, if there really is something there that is not what we're thinking, that we just don't know.
Skylar, would you be able to propose some language tonight that is sufficient enough, but not handcuffing them, that would allow us to move on with it?
I was just thinking about that. That's kind of my thought.
Well, let me ask.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I have a proposal, but I would preface that by saying that it seems fair to me that trust on both sides is required, and perhaps there should be some acknowledgement that you are or are not going to consider requiring the house to have a front on two sides, as that seems to me to be the primary or first issue. My suggestion would be that the condition be the final PUD site plan shall include additional renderings, including design material and elevation schedules, which shall require the approval at the time of considering the final PUD site plan by the Plan Commission. That gives you the right to look at these drawings, get them in, and determine that they're satisfactory, and yet allow the applicant petitioners to invest more time and energy and money in this project, with the understanding that this body will be treating them fairly.
Could you read that again to us, please? How you're suggesting we word that?
The final PUD site plan shall include additional renderings, including design, material, and elevation schedules, which shall require approval at the time of considering the final PUD site plan by the Plan Commission.
So, but that's at the final though. Is there any reason why we can't see it at the next step?
They have it, right?
That is the next step that comes before this body.
Okay, so as long as we could see it at the next step,
That's your
I would be in favor of that.
With the petitioner applicants.
Would you be in favor of what he just proposed?
Yes, I think I will be okay, and I think I have majority of things already in place because I was ready for previous process. So like buildings doesn't change we change a little bit north and south side. Also, I just want to mention one thing, that all the buildings are gonna have address from Washington Boulevard. They're not gonna have from Jake Lane. And if you can see on the plan, I think from the lot 8, there is no even back road. It's a conservation or preserve for conservation area. So all the address is going to be from Washington Boulevard, which already by itself says that, hey, we are front.
Right. Okay, that's a good point. So not all of the houses are affected by this requirement. So only the ones that face both streets, basically.
Also, Mr. Weir, could I ask you a question too? Would that be, I mean, you're more involved with my involvement with your architectural review committee is that you guys tell us this meets the code. There's some variances are granted. We review it structurally and then we sign off on it. We really don't get involved. You guys run your own thing over there. Is that, I mean, with your experience, does what we're saying tonight fit into the architectural review committee review as well? Is that something you guys could easily incorporate into that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Hale, for the words. I think that's a good way to handle it.
So a quick question. Can I take that as a motion and I second?
Not yet. We have
Mr. President,
You-
you need
we have
to
to
have
have
a public hearing
comment,
first.
right. Yeah, so we'll open this up to public comment right now. Is there any public comment related to this petition? Is there anybody watching, Drew, that needs to say anything?
Nobody that has it.
Okay. Then at this point, then public comment period is closed. And we'll move forward with a motion that includes the two conditions that Mr. York has specified in addition to the wording of the condition that Mr. Hale has put forward.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
may I suggest that this be a two-step process? And that the first motion should be to approve or not petition 900-23(1) and to adopt the findings of the planning department report and the conditions set forth in that report as augmented by the words that we just spoke of. The application, the preliminary PUD site plan and petitioner's proposed ordinance, and forward the same to the city council with a favorable or unfavorable recommendation. I know that's a mouthful, but it covers everything that you want to do. You just have to decide if you're going to approve it or not, and if it's going to be with a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation. Then the second motion would be simply to adopt Resolution 1-2023 in the form submitted and forward the resolution to the council with the favorable recommendation and materials. And then that resolution will be certified by signature of the president and secretary, and that is forwarded to the common council. In addition, I'm just reminding you that you may do this or you may request additional time.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hale. So taking it, let's do the first one, which is approving this petition with the conditions. There is a motion. So move.
With a favorable recommendation.
Support.
May I just ask clarification? The motion is to approve the petition, to adopt the findings of the planning department report, to adopt and require the conditions set forth in that report, and the additional verbal condition discussed, as well as the preliminary PUD site plan and petitioner's proposed ordinance. The application to include all exhibits and all to be forwarded to the city council with a favorable recommendation. Is that the motion that was put forth?
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we're
Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Before we vote on it, can I just get clarification? it's my understanding that this still requires a review of setbacks and density and all of those kinds of things. That's, okay.
It'll be in the next.
So all of that is in it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay,
Mr. York.
I'll call for the vote. Mr. Balling,
Yes.
Mr. Dabney,
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Latchford,
Yes.
Miss Mealy,
Yes.
Miss Tejeda, Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved. We're going to send this to City Council with a favorable recommendation, and then see what they say.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Hale.
you all have a copy of that resolution. It's marked as number 1-2023. And that's a resolution that just outlines what's taken place. That is the approval and the certifying that approval to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation. So I think just a motion to adopt that resolution in the form submitted and forwarding the same to the council would be an appropriate motion to make.
I'd like to make that in the form of a motion.
Support. Call for the vote. Mr. Balling,
Yes.
Mr. Dabney,
Aye.
Mr. Lashford,
Yes.
Miss Mealy.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Miss Tejeda, Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Mr. York.
Yes.
Did you gave me a bunch of these copies. Am I supposed to pass these out to the,
No. I just need one signed.
just one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just one signed. I just laid them up there in case anybody needed them or wanted them.
Does everybody have a copy of the resolution? Have you seen it? Oh, let's pass them out then. Here's the one I'll sign. You want me to date it?
Mr. York,
Yes.
will you please add that condition,
Yes.
write it in if need be, and I can,
Mr. Lashford wrote it all down, so I'm going to.
I can give you the wording after we're done.
Okay, I can do that. If you don't mind, will you? Could you email it to me? Your wording.
Sure.
Okay, either that or I can watch the video and get it.
Yeah, I'll be happy to email it to you as soon as we're done.
Excellent. We'll get it added in.
Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Thank you.
So next item would be, do you have any new business or old business to discuss?
No new, no old at this time.
Is there any public comment regarding this petition or anything else related to the Plan Commission? Hearing none, public comment is closed. Are there any other commissioner comments regarding anything? Okay, we're good. Then we are adjourned then until the April meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.